We're getting our equipment together to head to Minneapolis to meet up with Stanley the Dirt Monkey to build a recreational pond for him and his family. Getting ready to play in the dirt with Stanley the Dirt Monkey. Hey, good morning everybody. Ed the Pond Professor here, back in Minnesota. I am here with a man that needs no introduction, Stanley Genetic, Dirt Monkey. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. And it's genetic, by the way.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
genetic.
no,
oh my gosh, I apologize.
I've been called a lot worse.
Okay. I was out a few months ago with Chris Wilson. We started doing some layout of the construction project. You definitely did your homework, and I knew you would. I mean, I gave kind of a list of materials that we're gonna need, and bam, like here it is.
Guys, I blew up Ed's phone, and I don't just blow up Ed's phone. I take videos. I'm like, Ed, does this 60 tons look like the 60 tons you had envisioned? Ed, is this the right size rock for what you had envisioned? Ed, and I'm like, oh my God, Ed's gonna be so sick of hearing his own name by the time we're done with this project.
So when I saw the rocks, you were holding them there, I'm like, yeah, that's perfect size. I'm like, that's it. Well, this is always the hardest part, is just getting all the stuff together, the planning and everything. But you know, as you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. It's always that planning process. Coming in with the right plan, we have the dimensions, you know, we know how many cubic yards of soil are coming out. We know what it's going to take for excavation. Then we could start assembling all these different pieces. But what I like about that, it allows us more time for creativity. A lot of people get wrapped up in a lot of these other things because they're not familiar with it. And when that happens, it sucks the energy out of you. For us, this type of stuff goes really, really fast. Now we can focus just on the artistry of this thing. Now we have the raw materials here, and now it's like, okay, now it's game time. Let's start carving and shaping and really sculpting the earth to create a really cool naturalistic feature, which is what your goals are. Using local materials. River rock came from right down the road. Minnesota boulders. You know, so we want to stick with all that stuff. I cannot deny the equipment behind me here. I know you are very, very big, world known for your take on modern technology and how it could actually be used to make a project more efficient. You want to give us a little walkthrough on what you're thinking about for utilization here on the project?
What I did here, Ed, was this is kind of like, I consider this the work before the work begins.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
You said artistry. I consider you to be the best in the world, period, and that means the entire Aquascape team. Greg and Brian and you guys are the team to go to for this stuff. So I didn't want to come here and be stressed over, do I got the right materials? Do I got this? And in fact, what I wanted to do was, you see all these boulders right here? The guy that's holding the camera right now, his job is going to be to lay all of these boulders out so you can walk out of the gate and go, I want this one, I want that one, I want this one, this goes here, that goes there, that goes there. Not have them just show up and all of a sudden you got to get creative. You've got it all laid out. But then the equipment goes hand in hand. We can't do the work efficiently if we don't have the right gear to do it. The equipment is just a tool. It's just a drill. It's just a saw. It's just whatever, but it's got a diesel engine. So we got to have the right equipment to do the right job. That's what's going to increase efficiency. Knowing what all these next steps are, but having the right material ahead of time so you can just come in and do what you got to do. Not worrying about how that's going to go in place. And we got more equipment even coming on the way, because I don't want anything to hold us back except for your imagination.
I love it. Having the right materials, the right equipment, it's very freeing. So now we know we could really kind of push the envelope and try to do some really unique things here because we have the ability to do it.
The one thing that I'm saying, especially to Ed, is I want this to be his vision. He's like, do we want to put blocks under here and do this? I'm like, sure, Ed. Do we want to build this bridge? Sure, Ed. What do you want to do?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because you know what? I mean, I've been installing ponds, and I will say this, my very first job was a pond. And I think I was 14 years old. And then I started to do pond after pond after pond. That's how I got started. But I also can recognize when somebody is absolutely a master of what they're doing, and I feel like a student. I'm here as a student. That's why I'm saying sure, Ed, because all I want to do is learn from the best. That's what the next 2 weeks are for me. Guys, this is so awesome. I'm so pumped.
Is moving along. We have this back edge set, which was good. You can see where the original grade was. We cut down a little bit into the original slope, and then we have about 24 inches of fill on top of that, and then it slowly pitches towards that fence over in the background. Again, the most soil that we had to put in was right over here. You can tell where the grade was. You can see where the turf line is over here. So just kind of pitching away in that direction. So we're doing our first cut. We're going down approximately 2 feet for this first ledge. Then what we'll do is we're going to mark out where the deep zone will be. We're going to have that bridge going across. Will be a little bit shallower. We want to try to create a little bit of interest and some contours down in the bottom. So we'll play around with that as we continue along. But as of right now, we're going to focus on getting down to that 2-foot level, and then we'll start laying out the next level.
Zach got a little cowboyish. Took the bucket off and yee-haw! So all we did was pop her back down and kept her off from the fence. Pretty straightforward. Just another day in the office, right?
And that was called the no bucket on the front on a hill. It's like all I did was drop this bucket right here and then just switch over to that one, and you just back up just that little bit and you get that counterweight with no weight on the front.
I am checking out a local lake, getting a little inspiration for the Dirt Monkey project. So the reason I chose this lake, this is an old quarry actually. It has been abandoned now for 25, 30 years. It was in use for many, many years. It is limestone. There are a series of springs down here on the bottom, so we constantly have an upflow of water. But look at these deep drop-offs and everything, and way back over on that other edge, we have some big exposed walls of stone. We also have some little shallow areas and beaches and things like that. Kind of a cool little spot. I believe they said this is approximately 40 acres. I have talked to a couple of the local forest preserve people. They have done some diving and things like that inside of here, so which is really, really cool. Whenever I'm designing and building a water feature, I'm using biomimicry techniques. Our systems have a constant flow of water. This is a pond or a lake, small lake. It has a flow though from the bottom to the top. If you're familiar with how springs actually operate, we usually get very, very good water quality because the water flows up through lots of layers of rock, gravel, and sand and things like that, which helps to remove sediments, detoxify the water. But what it also does is it creates that big upwelling from the bottom. The other thing that's happening is the water down in the ground that's creating that upwelling spring has been underground for many, many years typically. So what that means is it hasn't been part of the photo period. The water's going to be cool, it's going to be in the dark, so it's not going to have particulate, it's not going to have phytoplankton and things like that inside of it. So typically when you are looking at spring-fed lakes and ponds, the water is going to be very clear. And actually right now the water's clear but a little bit murky because we've had a bunch of rain recently, but typical. It's very cyclical. We are mimicking this type of an ecosystem. Natural groundwater coming up. Our wetland filter mimics the action of a spring. As water flows up through all of that rock and gravel, it becomes detoxified through the natural biological filtration by that biofilm that's actually growing, and it's covering all the different surfaces of the rock and gravel, and that is helping to remove that stuff. And then over here, this is the outfall. It's connecting in with the Big Rock Creek. So constant flow of water coming up, like in our wetland filtration system, and then the water flows out into our intake bays. We have a constant flow or a cycle of water. You look on the surface of this pond, there's actually no debris or anything like that in any way, shape, or form, and that's because all of the natural wind plus the flow of water is going to sweep all of that material further downstream. This is exactly what I'm trying to mimic. Now what we're talking about over at Stanley's place is not going to be quite this deep, but we are looking at 5 to 6 feet depending upon how the excavation goes. The reason we want to go deep is because Stanley wants to have native fish. They're going to need a bigger volume of water, so we want to ensure that they have the necessary volume so that they could thrive in that ecosystem. So here's the confluence. See the flow that we have coming out of the lake, and then we have the flow of the Big Rock Creek over here. Everything kind of comes together. This actually is a favorite spot for my son to go fishing. Great water quality, beautiful, you know, it flows like this pretty much year round. So you can see how effective this little section is. And this is a relatively small opening and a relatively small flow for a lake or a pond of this size. So it just kind of shows that when I'm designing and building something, I'm using some of these natural techniques and I'm modeling things after natural ecosystems because I know this works. So I see it all the time. So I've been viewing this pond for 20 plus years. So I think it is a great model for us to utilize, not only for Stanley's project, for other projects as well. Everything is looking great. We are at our depth. We are 5 feet. You can see we left a ramp going down here in the bottom, and that's because we're gonna have to work our way out of this back corner, as I was talking about earlier. We have the area set for the intake bay. Remember what the intake bay is? That is a customized skimmer system that is going to allow any leaf debris, anything that blows into the pond, a chance to be pulled into a convenient area for removal. So that's gonna help to keep the maintenance low. The other important thing about that is it's gonna pre-filter all the water going to the submersible pump. That becomes more and more important because that water is being discharged into our wetland filter. You want to try to remove as many of the solids as possible before sending the water to the wetland, because the nitrifying bacteria can be finicky. They don't like a lot of sediment. When we get excess sedimentation happening in riverbeds, it kills off benthic layers. That bottom layer of river rock and all that type of stuff gets covered up in sediment. It suffocates the natural organisms that are living in that area, and it will change the biology of the river system. No different with this. That filter bed is a living, breathing organism, so we want to make sure that we are feeding it appropriately. High dissolved oxygen, not a lot of sediments. That's going to give us the best water quality. Because of driving in and out of this area, we're just going to rough in the wetland, rebuild a ridge going across right where Stanley's sitting. We're going to have to build a ridge of soil to separate the wetland filter from the pond itself. That'll happen sometime next week. So our goal by tomorrow is to come in, get excavation cleaned up, which actually this looks good all the way to about here. We are then going to assemble our aqua blocks. We'll put in our fabric. We will then come in with our EPDM membrane. Then on top of that, another layer of the geotextile fabric as a cushion. Then we'll start placing all of our boulders. We're also building up the outside perimeter. You can see we're building up about a foot above the existing grade. The reason we're going to do that is I want to have this wetland filter slightly above the pond level. So that's going to kind of create a little bit of a rapid type thing, or kind of a little bit of additional aeration, which I think is important. We don't have room here to do a big waterfall. That was not a priority. Said he wants something very, very natural. We're just going to kind of create like a natural wetland with just kind of a seepage type area. All right, Stanley, it's like a bomb went off in your backyard.
Yeah, but you gotta break an egg to make an omelet.
This is so true. We do have a few challenges here with the project because of the size of the pond and access. Let's take a walk and see what we had to do to make this work.
Nothing can go normal when you were in my job.
Never. So normally we would have done our excavation, graded the bottom, put our fabric down, put the liner down, started setting rocks. We couldn't do that here because we have to work our way out. Thankfully, you got a diversity of equipment here because that's really what's saving us. On a typical job site, we wouldn't have all of this stuff usually. You know, you might have a skid and you might have an excavator, but you're not gonna have 2 excavators, 2 skids.
And a loader.
And a loader. You know, I mean, it's like we're not gonna have all that stuff.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I mean, you had access to all these things, but what would we have done? I mean, it would have just taken twice as long, I guess, right? I mean, there's really no other option. This seems like it's working out really well.
Every night I go to bed, I go praying, please don't let me hit my wife's new hot tub.
Oh God, yes.
That is the only thing. I like, let everyone be safe and don't hit the hot tub.
But overall, what do you think? You're happy with progress so far?
Progress, yeah.
Good.
You know, when I build these things, I look at this like, and I'm thinking, God, Ed has got to get this boulder tweaked and that boulder tweaked, and I'm letting this be your vision. I said that right from the get-go.
You did.
But what it looks like to me from the cab, I could have backed the dump truck up and dumped the boulders out, pushed a couple around, it's like, yeah, Yeah, that's pretty good, Ed. But I know it'll all come together in the end.
It'll all come together.
That's what makes it fun.
It does. We have a bigger team coming out next week. We'll knock out the filter first day, continue working on rocks, and then we got to start pulling this liner back so we can start making more progress going on.
Whatever you want to do.
All right, well, I think that's the plan.